The first rays of the Manila sunrise filtered through the narrow alleyways, painting streaks of gold across puddles left by the night's rain. The city was stirring awake, jeepneys rumbling down the boulevard, vendors calling out their morning deals, and the sweet, familiar scent of fresh pan de sal drifting from the nearby bakery. And there, at the corner of a cracked sidewalk beneath a flickering streetlight, stood Marco dela Cruz. His guitar, once bright mahogany, was now faded and scratched, held together by tape and faith. His shoes had long lost their soles, yet his spirit remained unbroken. Every morning, before the sun climbed too high, Marco tuned his guitar by ear the same way his late father had taught him years ago. The city was noisy, impatient, always in motion. But when Marco played, somehow, time slowed. He cleared his throat and began strumming the soft chords of Can't Help Falling in Love. His voice was gentle at first, cautious, like a secret he was afraid to share. Then it grew, filling the space between the honking cars and chatter of the crowd. The old women buying bread stopped to listen. Jeepney drivers paused mid-smoke. Even children chasing each other nearby quieted down. There was something about Marco's voice, not just its uncanny resemblance to Elvis Presley's tone, but the soul beneath it. Every lyric felt lived, every note carried a story. Wise men say, only fools rush in. A bakery worker stepped out, holding a steaming cup of coffee. Here, Kuya Marco, she said kindly, placing it by his feet. You sound just like Elvis this morning. He smiled, eyes crinkling. Thank you, Anna. You keep my mornings warm. She grinned and hurried back inside. As the song went on, a few coins clinked into the open guitar case. But Marco wasn't watching the money, he was looking up, at the sky that was slowly turning blue. Somewhere in that vastness was his mother's hospital room. He sang was for her. At 48, Maria dela Cruz had been diagnosed with heart disease that made it hard for her to breathe, let alone work. Marco had promised her he'd handle the bills, no matter what it took. And so he sang. Every day. Rain or shine. He sang in the mornings outside the bakery, and at night, by the dim glow of street lamps near the marketplace. His fingertips were rough from the strings, but he never stopped. Sometimes people laughed when he tried to imitate Elvis's dance moves, that half-tilt of the head, the playful smirk, but Marco didn't mind. Music had kept him alive, just as surely as it had once brought the world together through the king's voice. Still, there were nights he went home with only a handful of coins and a heavy heart. In the small one-room home he shared with his mother, he would count every peso carefully before handing it to her. It's not much, Mama, he'd whisper. She would smile, her eyes soft. It's enough, Anik. You gave me music. That's already a blessing. Those words carried him through every hardship. But lately, things had grown harder. The hospital bills were rising faster than his earnings. His mother's health was declining. And Marco, though he never showed it, was terrified. On one particularly quiet morning, as gray clouds loomed overhead, Marco started playing Love Me Tender. His voice trembled slightly. Fewer people stopped to listen that day. Most hurried past, umbrellas in hand, too busy to notice a man pouring his heart into the street. Then, out of nowhere, a man in his 40s stopped across the road, holding a phone. He was tall, wearing a tourist's hat, clearly foreign. He listened quietly for a while, eyes narrowing with interest. When Marco finished, the man clapped, walked over, and asked, You sound like Elvis Presley. What's your name? Marco wiped his forehead and laughed nervously. Just Marco, sir. I sing for my mom. She's in the hospital. The man smiled kindly. You've got something special, my friend. The world needs to hear you. Marco didn't think much of it. Tourists often said nice things before moving on. He nodded politely and continued packing up as raindrops began to fall. What Marco didn't know was that the man had recorded his entire performance, the raw, trembling voice, the soaked street, the humble smile at the end. That night, he uploaded the video to YouTube with the title, this Filipino street singer sounds just like Elvis and he's singing for his sick mother. By the next morning, everything had changed. Marco woke to the sound of his phone buzzing uncontrollably. Dozens of notifications, messages, and missed calls. His friend Anna burst into the house, holding her phone out. "Kuya, Marco. You're viral. Look, 5 million views overnight." Marco blinked, confused. The video showed him, sitting in the rain, singing "Love Me, Tender." The comments section was flooded with love. "This is pure soul. Elvis would be proud. Someone get this man on AGT." Tears welled in his eyes as he read the words. His mother, resting in bed, looked at the screen and smiled weakly. "See, Anak. The world finally heard you." That day, Marco didn't go out to sing. He stayed by her side, holding her hand, whispering, "If the world really heard me, Mama. Maybe they'll let me sing on a real stage one day." Later that week, an email arrived from America's Got Talent. It read, "Dear Marco, we saw your video online and were deeply moved by your story and your voice. We'd love to invite you to audition for AGT 2025 Inches Los Angeles." Marco stared at the message for a long moment. His hands trembled. He looked at his mother, the woman who'd taught him kindness, humility, and the courage to dream even when dreams felt impossible. "Mama," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They want me to sing in America." Her eyes glistened. "Then you must go, Anak. Not for fame. Not for money. Go so the world can feel what love sounds like." Marco knelt beside her bed, clutching her hands. Outside, the Manila sky began to glow again, just as it did every morning. But this time, it wasn't just another sunrise, it was the beginning of something miraculous. Because somewhere across the ocean, a stage awaited a man who had once only known the streets, a man whose voice, born from love and struggle, was about to leave the world, and even Simon Cowell, speechless. The Los Angeles sun blazed overhead as Marco de la Cruz stepped out of the airport, clutching his old guitar case like a lifeline. It had taken him nearly 20 hours to get here, 20 hours of turbulence, tight connections, and whispered prayers. For the first time in his life, he was in America, standing in the city where dreams were made and broken. His shoes, still the same worn-out pair he had been used to sing on Manila's sidewalks, felt out of place against the polished airport floors. Crowds hurried past, pulling shiny luggage, speaking in accents he barely understood. Marco moved slowly, his eyes wide with awe. Every billboard, every passing car, every smiling stranger seemed like something out of a movie. But beneath that wonder was a knot of fear. He was here for America's Got Talent 2025. Him, a street performer from the Philippines who'd never sung anywhere but his neighborhood corner. His mother's words echoed in his mind, "Go so the world can feel what love sounds like." That thought alone gave him the courage to take each step forward. 2 days later, Marco stood backstage at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, where the AGT auditions were being filmed. Around him, performers practiced their acts: jugglers, dancers, magicians, comedians. Glitter shimmered on costumes, and the air buzzed with nervous excitement. Marco, in his faded denim jacket and plain white shirt, felt invisible. His guitar looked old compared to the sleek instruments others carried. Yet, when he gently plucked a few notes, even the nearby crew members turned to listen, something raw and haunting in his tone. A production assistant handed him a form and a numbered tag. "You're contestant 1725, she said with a polite smile. "Good luck, Marco." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Thank you, ma'am." The holding room had large TV screens showing the acts performing before him. Some contestants earned laughter, others thunderous applause. A few walked off with disappointed faces. Marco's palms began to sweat. His stomach tightened. He whispered under his breath, "Lord, please. Just help me sing from my heart." Hours passed. Then came the call. Contestant 1725, Marco de la Cruz, you're up next. He stood, gripping his guitar case, his legs trembling. A stagehand led him down a narrow hallway toward the blinding lights ahead. He could hear the audience, thousands of voices, murmuring, laughing, cheering. He peeked through the curtain and froze. There they were. Simon Cowell, Sofia Vergara, Heidi Klum, and Howie Mandel, faces he'd only ever seen on TV, now just meters away. He inhaled deeply, fingers brushing against the hospital bracelet tied around his wrist, his mother's. Then, he stepped into the light. The stage was enormous, bathed in a golden glow. The moment Marco appeared, the audience quieted, intrigued by the shy man with the old guitar. Simon leaned forward, squinting. "Hello. What's your name, sir?" Marco adjusted the microphone. "Good evening, sir. My name is Marco Dela Cruz, and I come from the Philippines." Sofia smiled brightly. "Ah, the Philippines. Beautiful place. What brings you here to AGT?" Marco hesitated. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. I sing on the streets back home. I used to sing for my mother, who is sick. Someone posted my video online, and I got invited here." The audience murmured softly. Simon tilted his head. "So, you've never performed on a big stage before?" He shook his head. "No, sir. This is my first time. But I've always dreamed of it." There was a pause. A gentle silence that filled the room. Simon's tone softened. "All right, Marco. The stage is yours. Show us what you've got." Marco's hands trembled as he adjusted his guitar strap. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and began to strum the opening chords of "Can't Help Falling in Love." At first, his voice was soft, fragile, uncertain. But as the melody flowed, something shifted. He forgot the cameras, the judges, the thousands watching. He remembered only his mother, the warmth of her hand, her voice saying, "Sing, Anak. Let the world feel it." And so, he sang. His voice rose and fell like waves, gentle, aching, filled with soul. The crowd leaned in, hanging on every word. His accent gave the song a unique tenderness, transforming Elvis's classic into something deeply human. By the second verse, even Simon's expression had changed. His usual stoicism melted away, replaced by quiet awe. Heidi clasped her hands near her heart. Sofia's eyes glistened. The lights dimmed, and Marco's voice echoed through the hall, rich and trembling, "Take my hand, take my whole life too." As the final note lingered, the entire room fell silent, not a cough. Not a whisper. Just stillness, the kind that only happens when thousands of people share the same emotion at once. Marco slowly lowered his guitar, unsure what to do. He glanced up, afraid of rejection. Then, the silence broke into thunder. The crowd erupted in cheers, whistles, and applause. People stood to their feet, shouting his name. Marco's eyes widened in disbelief as tears blurred his vision. He looked toward the judges' table. Simon Cowell, the man known for his sharp tongue and unflinching critiques, was speechless. He leaned back in his chair, blinking rapidly, as if processing what he'd just witnessed. Finally, he stood, one hand pressed to his chest. "Marco. I've heard thousands of singers in my life. But what you just did, that wasn't just a song, that was honesty. Pure, emotional honesty." The audience roared again. Heidi wiped her tears. "That was the most beautiful thing I've heard in a long time." Howie smiled. "You made everyone here believe in something bigger than music." Marco's throat tightened. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I just wanted my mother to be proud." The audience cheered louder, chanting, "Golden buzzer. Golden buzzer." The judges exchanged looks. Marco stood frozen, his heart pounding like a drum. Then, Heidi Klum pressed the golden buzzer. The sound filled the auditorium, a magical, almost cinematic moment. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling, raining down like stars. Marco dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. His hands covered his face as tears streamed freely. He looked up at the falling gold, whispering, "Mama, we did it." Simon approached him on stage, shaking his hand firmly. "You just reminded the world why we listen to music, to feel something real. You're a gift, Marco." The crowd chanted his name again and again as he walked off stage, trembling, crying, smiling all at once. Backstage, Marco collapsed into a chair, still covered in gold confetti. A producer handed him a bottle of water and said softly, That was history." He nodded weakly, unable to speak. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a video call from home. He answered. His mother appeared on the screen, lying in her hospital bed, smiling through tears. "I saw it, Anik. I saw everything. You made them feel what love sounds like." Marco held the phone close to his heart, whispering, "It's all for you, Mama." And as the curtain fell on his first performance in America, Marco realized something profound. He hadn't just sung a song. He had carried the soul of a nation, the love of a son, and the power of kindness across the ocean, and left the world and Simon Cowell speechless. The sound of the golden buzzer still echoed in Marco's mind long after the last flecks of confetti had settled on the stage floor. It was like a dream, one he was afraid to wake up from. The roar of the audience thundered in his chest, yet all he could hear was his heartbeat and the faint hum of his mother's voice in memory, saying softly, "Sing, Anak. Sing from the soul." He was still kneeling, gold dust clinging to his hair and jacket. His old guitar lay beside him, strings glistening under the spotlight. For a long moment, Marco simply stayed there, a man from the Manila streets, overwhelmed by the glory of a moment he had never dared imagine. Simon Cowell had not moved. The usually sharp-tongued judge stood in stunned silence, his expression unguarded, vulnerable, even. Around him, Heidi Klum still had tears on her cheeks. Sophia was clapping with both hands pressed over her heart. Howie Mandel leaned toward Simon and whispered something, but Simon didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on Marco. The audience, thousands strong, had risen to their feet. And yet, amid the noise, there was an invisible thread of stillness that wrapped around the moment, something sacred. Something human. Marco finally stood, trembling slightly as he reached for the microphone. His voice cracked when he spoke. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I never thought this would happen." Heidi smiled, stepping forward. "You deserve this, Marco. You just gave the world one of the most beautiful performances we've ever had." Sophia nodded, her voice warm. "You reminded us all what music is truly about: love, emotion, connection. You sang from your soul, and that's why we all felt it." Howie added, "You didn't just sound like Elvis, Marco, you felt like him, that same humility, that same honesty. This is the heart of AGT." The crowd erupted again in cheers, chanting his name, "Marco, Marco, Marco." He pressed his hands together and bowed slightly, a gesture of deep gratitude from his culture, then pointed gently toward the heavens. "For my mother," he said softly. The cameras zoomed in as tears filled his eyes. Simon finally spoke. His voice was quieter than anyone expected, but it carried across the entire auditorium. "Marco," he began, pausing, visibly holding back emotion. "In all my years judging this show, I've seen incredible talent. But I don't think I've ever seen someone sing from a place so pure." The audience hushed again. Even the judges leaned closer. Simon continued, his usual British composure softening with sincerity. "You walked out here with nothing but an old guitar and a dream. You could have chosen any song to impress us, but instead, you sang one of the most heartfelt renditions of Elvis I've ever heard. And you made it your own." Marco blinked rapidly, trying to absorb the words. He looked down, clutching his chest where his heart felt like it might burst. Simon took a breath. Music like that doesn't just entertain. It heals. It connects people who've never met, across countries. That's a gift, Marco, and I'm honored we got to witness it tonight." The audience erupted once more into applause so thunderous it seemed to shake the walls. The cameraman tried to keep up as confetti fluttered again from above. Marco could barely see through the shimmer of gold and the blur of tears. He brought the microphone close to his lips again. I came here with nothing but hope, he said, his accent thick but his words clear. I used to sing on the streets back home. People gave me coins, sometimes just smiles. But tonight, you gave me something I can never repay, a reason to believe that even a simple voice can matter. His humility struck a chord deeper than any high note could. A young girl in the audience wiped her tears. A man in the back held up a small Philippine flag. The camera panned to the audience, people from every background, every age, united in the emotion of a single song. It was more than a performance now. It was a moment in time, one that reminded everyone watching that greatness doesn't need glamour, and that sometimes, the purest voices come from the most unexpected places. Backstage, moments later, Marco sat alone for a moment, still trembling, still overwhelmed. He could hear the muffled cheers echoing through the hallway. Stagehands smiled as they passed by, giving him thumbs up and pats on the back. He took out his phone, his fingers shaking, and dialed home. It was morning in Manila. Marco. Anna's voice came through first, his friend from the bakery, crying with joy. We saw it. We saw everything. The whole barangay's watching you on TV right now. Marco laughed, wiping his face. Really? You can see me there? Of course. Everyone's crying. Your mama too. He felt his throat tighten. Put her on, please. There was shuffling, and then a weak but familiar voice came through the speaker. Anak. Marco's tears returned instantly. Mama. I saw you, my son, she whispered, her breathing soft and slow. I saw you under the golden lights. You were beautiful. The world finally heard what I've always known, that your heart sings louder than any microphone. He covered his mouth, sobbing quietly. Mama, I did it for you. Everything. Every note. I know, Anak, she said, her voice cracking with pride. And your papa is watching too, from heaven. You made him so proud. Marco closed his eyes, letting her words wash over him like the warmth of sunlight. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a struggling singer. He felt like a son who had finally kept his promise. Outside, the producers were already replaying the performance on monitors. Staff members, even those hardened by years in the industry, had tears in their eyes. One whispered to another, that's going to be the clip the whole world talks about. The moment that reminds people why this show exists. Indeed, within hours, clips of Marco's golden buzzer performance flooded social media. Hashtags like #Filipino Elvis and #Golden Heart Marco trended worldwide. Viewers from every corner of the globe shared the video, from the USA to Japan, from Canada to the Middle East. Comment after comment read, I don't even know him, but I'm crying. This is what humanity sounds like. Simon Cowell speechless. That says it all. Later that night, Marco stood alone outside the auditorium, looking up at the Los Angeles sky. The city lights glittered like gold dust, just like the confetti that had fallen hours earlier. He could still smell the faint scent of the stage, the warmth of the lights on his skin. He took out his mother's hospital bracelet from his wrist and held it up toward the stars. We did it, Mama, he whispered. We made them feel what love sounds like. He strummed his guitar softly, just a few gentle chords that faded into the quiet night. And though the streets of LA were far from Manila, for the first time in his life, he felt at home. Because home wasn't a place. It was a song one sung with love, humility, and hope. And in that golden silence that followed his performance, the whole world had finally listened. The lights of the Pasadena Civic Auditorium had long dimmed, but the glow inside Marco's heart refused to fade. He sat alone in the dressing room, surrounded by silence, a silence so full, it almost hummed. His guitar rested on his lap, confetti still tangled in its strings. Every now and then, he'd run his fingers across them, just to remind himself that it was real, that the sound of applause, the shimmer of gold, the warmth of Simon Cowell's words weren't dreams born from the Manila sidewalks. His reflection in the mirror didn't look like a superstar. His denim jacket still carried dust from travel, his hair was still unevenly cut, his sneakers still frayed at the seams. Yet tonight, none of that mattered. He was the Filipino Elvis, the man who had sung from his heart and made the world stop. There was a soft knock on the door. A producer stepped in, smiling brightly. "Marco, you might want to check your phone," she said. "It's blowing up." He gave her a puzzled look, then pulled out his old phone. The screen was flooded with notifications, thousands upon thousands. His social media accounts, long forgotten, were filled with messages from strangers across the globe. He began to scroll, reading each one slowly, his eyes widening. "Your performance made me call my mom after years of silence. I lost my father recently, and your song made me feel him again. Thank you, Marco. You reminded me what love sounds like." He couldn't stop the tears that gathered. Every message felt like a voice echoing back what he had tried to give: comfort, connection, hope. Just then, a staff member peeked into the room. "Marco, press is waiting. You have your post-show interview in 5 minutes." He nodded, wiping his eyes quickly. "Yes, ma'am. I'm ready." The interview room was bright with cameras and microphones. A cheerful host smiled as Marco sat across from her. "Marco Dela Cruz, the man who made Simon Cowell speechless," she said, grinning. "How does it feel to have the whole world talking about you right now?" Marco smiled shyly. "It still feels unreal. I was just singing for my mother. I didn't expect all of this." The host leaned forward. "Tell us more about her. Everyone was touched by that moment when you said, 'For my mother.'" He took a deep breath. "My mama raised me alone after my father died. She used to hum Elvis songs while washing clothes. That's how I learned. When she got sick, I sang on the streets to pay for her medicine. Some days were hard, but every time I sang, people smiled. And I realized maybe music was the one thing I could give to the world, even if I had nothing else." The host's eyes glistened. "You gave more than music tonight. You gave love." Marco lowered his head, whispering, "That's all I ever wanted." Hours later, back in his hotel room, Marco sat by the window overlooking Los Angeles. The city below sparkled with life. He thought of the narrow alleys of Manila, the bakery, the streetlight, the faces of neighbors who once dropped coins into his guitar case. He missed home. He opened his phone again, scrolling past the flood of media requests and event invitations. Then one message caught his eye, an email with the subject line, "Regarding your mother's treatment, urgent." His heart skipped. He opened it quickly. It was from a foundation based in Los Angeles, a non-profit dedicated to supporting families in need. "Dear Mr. Dela Cruz, we were deeply moved by your story and performance on America's Got Talent. We would like to cover the full medical expenses for your mother's heart treatment in the Philippines. Please contact us at your earliest convenience." For a moment, Marco just stared at the words. His breath caught. His chest tightened, but not with fear, with gratitude so powerful it made him tremble. He called home immediately. His mother answered weakly, her smile faint but bright enough to pierce through the screen. "Mama," he said, voice shaking. "There's good news. A foundation, they saw the performance. They're going to pay for your treatment. Everything." Her eyes widened. "Anik. Are you sure?" He nodded, tears streaming. "Yes, Mama. You're going to get better." She covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. "God is good," she whispered. "He used your song to save me." Marco pressed the phone to his forehead, crying freely. "No, Mama. It was your love that gave me the song." That night, he couldn't sleep. The world outside was alive, honking cars, city lights, but inside, Marco sat by the window, bathed in the soft glow of the moon. He thought about every time he had doubted himself, Every night he had gone home with an empty pocket but a heart still full of melody. He realized something profound. All his life, he had thought music was what he did. But now he knew music was what he was. It was his way of giving, his way of loving, his way of saying thank you to a world that had finally listened. A few days later, AGT invited him for a press conference. The room was filled with cameras, reporters, and bright lights. Marco stood at the podium, nervous but steady. "Marco," one journalist asked, after going viral and receiving the golden buzzer, "what's your next dream?" He smiled softly. "To give back," he said simply. "I don't want this story to be just about me. There are so many singers back home, street musicians, children who sing just to eat, who have voices the world needs to hear. I want to help them find their stage too." The reporters murmured in admiration. Simon Cowell, who was sitting nearby, leaned toward his mic. "That," he said, "is why the world fell in love with you, Marco. You came here not for fame, but for purpose. And that's what makes an artist eternal." The room erupted in applause once more. Later that evening, Marco walked outside, his guitar slung across his shoulder. As he crossed the empty lot beside the studio, he noticed a group of young street performers playing music for tips just like he once had. He approached them with a smile. "Mind if I join?" They recognized him instantly. "You're the guy from AGT. The Filipino Elvis," he laughed softly. "I'm just Marco," he said, sitting down and tuning his guitar. Together, they began to play "Love Me Tender." Passers-by stopped to listen. Some recorded, some smiled. When the song ended, one of the kids asked, "Sir, how did you do it? How did you go from the streets to that big stage?" Marco thought for a moment before replying. "By never singing for myself. Every note I sang was for someone I loved, or someone who needed hope. When you sing for others, the world listens." The boy nodded, eyes wide, inspired. As Marco walked away under the soft glow of the city lights, he realized the real stage wasn't made of spotlights and cameras, it was anywhere love was shared through music. He looked up at the stars and whispered again, "Thank you. Not to luck. Not to fame. But to life, for showing him that kindness and love, when sung from the heart, can echo farther than any song ever could." Months had passed since Marco Dela Cruz first walked onto that massive AGT stage, trembling with fear and holding nothing but his mother's photo and an old guitar. Now, he stood beneath dazzling lights again, but this time, not as a contestant. The giant LED screens behind him read, "America's Got Talent, Champions Special Guest Performance." The audience roared as the host announced, "Please welcome back the man who brought Elvis back to life, the pride of the Philippines, Marco Dela Cruz." Marco stepped out slowly, his heart pounding, his lips curving into a humble smile. The crowd's cheers rolled like thunder, and for a moment, he just stood there soaking in every heartbeat, every cheer, every tear-streaked face in the front row. But what made his chest tighten most wasn't the fame or the applause. It was seeing her, his mother, sitting in the VIP section, strong again, her eyes shining with tears of joy. As the music began, a hush fell over the hall, the opening chords of "Can't Help Falling in Love" filled the air, soft, slow, and timeless. Marco took a deep breath and began to sing. "Wise men say, only fools rush in." His voice was warmer now, more mature, yet still carrying that soulful ache that had once silenced the world. But this time, he didn't sing for survival. He sang for gratitude, for love, for everyone who had believed in him when the world had turned away. The giant screens displayed clips from his journey, him singing barefoot in Manila streets, his mother watching proudly from a hospital bed, Simon pressing the golden buzzer, the golden confetti raining down, and now, the glowing faces of millions inspired by his story. "But I can't help falling in love with you." He looked at his mother as he sang the last line. Their eyes met, and time seemed to stop again, just like that first night. The crowd rose to their feet. The applause thundered through the auditorium, echoing like a wave of gratitude back to him. Some people cried, others clapped until their palms hurt, and somewhere in the front row, Simon Cowell smiled quietly, mouthing the words, "You did it, kid." After the performance, backstage buzzed with emotion. Crew members, judges, and even security guards came forward to shake Marco's hand. "You didn't just sing Elvis," one producer said with misty eyes. "You became him. You carried his soul with your own heart." Marco smiled softly. "I didn't try to be Elvis," he said. "I just tried to be me." But with the same love he sang with. Simon approached, hands in his pockets. "Marco," he said in that familiar, serious tone, "do you realize what you've done?" Marco tilted his head. "Sir. You've started something bigger than you," Simon said. "You've reminded the world that true music, real music, doesn't come from fame or perfection. It comes from pain, faith, and love." He paused, then added with a rare softness, "And I think Elvis himself would have stood up and applauded you tonight." Marco's eyes glistened. "Thank you, sir. That means more than words can say." Simon smiled. "Don't thank me. Thank your heart. It's what got you here." Later that evening, Marco returned to his hotel balcony overlooking the city lights of Los Angeles. His mother joined him, wrapped in a shawl, holding 2 mugs of salabat tea, their simple nightly ritual. "Anak," she said, sitting beside him, "I never imagined this. Seeing you up there tonight. It felt like a dream." Marco chuckled softly. "It feels like one for me too, Mama. Every single day." She looked out at the glittering skyline. "Do you remember that night under the streetlight in Manila? You were singing Love Me Tender, and I told you that your voice would reach people someday." He nodded, smiling. "You said the world needed to hear songs sung with kindness." She touched his cheek gently. "And they finally did." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the night wind brushing their faces. Marco looked down at the glowing city below, a city that had once been a distant dream. "Mama," he said softly, "I want to go home soon. Not to leave this behind but to share it." She turned to him. "Share it how?" He took a sip of his tea, eyes glinting with quiet determination. "There are hundreds of kids singing in the streets back home, just like I did. Some have voices more powerful than mine. I want to build a school, a place where they can learn music for free. No one should have to choose between survival and their dream." Her eyes welled up. "Oh, Anak. You're still that same boy, who sang for others." Marco smiled. "It's the only way I know how to sing." A few months later, back in Manila, the narrow streets buzzed with excitement. Posters lined the walls, the Marco de la Cruz Music Foundation opening ceremony. The same street where Marco once performed barefoot was now alive with music again. Children in bright shirts held tiny guitars, microphones, and tambourines. Parents gathered, smiling proudly. On a small wooden stage, Marco stood with his mother by his side. Behind him hung a simple banner that read, "Where every song begins with kindness." He took the mic and looked around at the faces full of hope. "When I sang on these streets, I never thought the world would listen," he began. "But I learned something beautiful: the world listens when your song comes from love. And that's what this place is about, love through music. Every child here deserves to be heard." The crowd applauded, tears glinting in their eyes. Marco then turned toward the students. "This school is yours. Sing your stories, sing your pain, sing your dreams. Don't ever stop singing, because one day, someone will need your song to keep going." Then, picking up his guitar, he began to strum the first few notes of "Can't Help Falling in Love." The children joined him, their small voices blending in harmony. "Take my hand. Take my whole life too." The crowd sang along, the air filled with laughter and tears. For a brief, golden moment, the street became a concert of hearts, the kind of music that doesn't just fill ears, but souls. As the sun set behind the Manila skyline, Marco looked up at the sky, whispering to himself, "Thank you, Elvis. Thank you, Mama. Thank you, music." He smiled, watching the children play their songs under the same streetlight where his own journey began. The circle had closed not with fame, but with love, the very thing that had started it all. Somewhere far away, the echoes of his voice blended with the laughter of the children, proof that kindness can echo across oceans, generations, and hearts. And just like that, the king's legacy lived on, not through imitation, but through inspiration. Through Marco de la Cruz, the Filipino who sang from his soul, and reminded the world what love truly sounds like.